gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Dun & Bradstreet's Business Across Borders 2021. My name is Divya Som and I'm your host for today's event. Well, let me remind our viewers that during the course of this event, you could share your opinions with us through the feedback section, as well as on your social media channels, of course, with hashtags DNBBAB and hashtag GrowWithDNB. Now, before we proceed, wanted to let you all know some fundamentals of the platform here. You can choose to go full screen by clicking on the full screen button located on the bottom right corner of the center screen. In case your screen freezes, it might be due to a drop in the internet connection. Please refresh your browser window and that should be fine. Well, today's event is a tribute to the Indian Exporters Fraternity. Exports play an important role in helping countries drive their respective comparative advantages and in boosting economic growth. Over the past 2 decades or so, exports have played an increasingly important role in India's economic growth. But in the post-pandemic world of today, the global trade scenario has changed significantly. The COVID-19 pandemic has led many global companies to consider realigning their supply chain strategies given the risks associated with single-source supply chains. With the global value chain likely to undergo some degree of shift in the current dynamic landscape, it's imperative for India's trade and exports to recoup and rediscover the path to recovery and growth. Today's event is an endeavor to recognize the pivotal role that exports can play in boosting India's economic growth. We will also focus on the changing dynamics of global value chains and the possibility of India carving a niche for herself in this new value chain. The event will also feature the release of the publication Business Across Borders 2021, which will dwell on the impact of the pandemic on supply chains across the globe and new perspectives on global supply chains for the post-pandemic world. The publication will have a list of India's leading exporters across various sectors. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partners for their invaluable support to this initiative. Our co-partners are Exchange India Limited and Wilhelm Textiles India Private Limited, and all our publication partners. We, ladies and gentlemen, are now in the presence of distinguished personalities from the sector, both sector's current scenario and what the future really holds for all of us. So starting with today's proceedings, I would like to introduce Mr. Avinash Gupta, Managing Director, India, Dun & Bradstreet. With over 3 decades of experience, Mr. Gupta is an execution-focused senior leader with a strong global background. Currently, he is responsible for Dun & Bradstreet's go-to-market strategy and business operations. Prior to joining Rabo Equity Advisors as the Managing Director, over the years, he worked extensively in financial services, including M&A, equity and debt financing, and private equity placement. He held various leadership positions in various global organizations like Deloitte, HSBC, UBS, Barings, Citibank, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Avinash Gupta to deliver the welcome address. Welcome, sir.
Dr. Ajay Sai, Director General and CEO of the Federation of Indian Export Organizations, FIO. Professor Bernard Hockman, Professor and Director, Global Economics at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies, European University Institute. Esteemed members of the panel discussion, event partners, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Dun & Bradstreet, I would like to welcome you, all of you, to this grand virtual event, Business Across Borders 2021. The purpose of this event is to bring the exporters community, policymakers, and other key stakeholders under one roof and to acknowledge their critical role in India's economic growth, as well as the global trade ecosystem at large. It is also an endeavor to capture the pulse of India's exports and to understand the roadmap to enhance India's position in the global value chain. The key highlights of today's proceedings are keynote addresses by key dignitaries, including Dr. Ajay Sai and Professor Bernard Hockman, and the Power Pack panel discussion. Another important highlight of today's proceedings is the digital launch of the first edition of Dun & Bradstreet's publication, Business Across Borders 2021. This publication is our endeavor to recognize and showcase the achievements of the leading exporters in India across various sectors. In recent years, the epicenter for economic activity has shifted to Asia, with China and India having risen as the key growth drivers of the world economy. However, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic, which broke out early last year, has severely disrupted global supply chains. It began with the supply shock in China, which very quickly escalated to a collapse of the entire production and logistics ecosystem across the globe. Within a matter of few weeks, businesses across the globe began to see the vulnerabilities in their sourcing strategies and supply chain. These developments, combined with the US-China trade war, which was at its peak last year, also added momentum to a trend of deglobalization. Overall, the crisis has forced businesses and entire economies to significantly review their business continuity and resilience strategies and to shift their focus to becoming more self-reliant. The unprecedented global crisis has also presented the perfect opportunity for a realignment in the global value chain and alternative solutions to supply-side risks. India, especially now, has an opportunity to carve a much bigger niche for herself in the global value chain. The government's Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan is a great step in this direction by encouraging, among other things, indigenous production to help in import substitution, as well as promoting export-driven growth. Over the past couple of decades, India has swiftly become one of the most important players in the global economic landscape. India's trade policies, government reforms, and inherent economic strengths have all contributed towards making it one of the most sought-after destinations for foreign investment. Undoubtedly, one of the biggest contributors to India's export story has been the services sector. Having said that, if India seeks to make a bigger impact in exports, it will necessarily have to focus on becoming a manufacturing hub as well. Interestingly, until the early 1990s, India and China both shared very similar levels of manufacturing and export capabilities. However, China's open door policy, which started much before India's, in 1978, kick-started its long-term modernization plan and market-oriented reforms, which in turn went on to create a strong private sector alongside state-owned enterprises. Just to get a sense of the huge gap that exists now between us and our neighbors, according to a study done by United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, in 2019, India ranked 42nd out of 152 countries with manufacturing value added, MVA. And here I'm using constant 2015 dollar numbers. The MVA for India total US dollars $430.25 billion. This was equal to 15.5% of India's GDP at that time. At the same time, China ranks second with MVA, and again in constant 2015 dollars was US dollars 4.1 trillion, which was approximately equal to 29% of China's GDP at that time. So just to re-emphasize the numbers again, India was $430 billion, China was $4.1 trillion. The corresponding percentage of GDP in India's case was approximately 16%. In China, it was nearly twice that at close to 29%. For many years, India has been seeing a lack of investment in physical and digital infrastructure development. While investments in these areas and India's policy on foreign direct investment, FDI, and ease of doing business have improved tremendously in the last 5-6 years, there is still a lot of ground for all of us to cover. For instance, according to the World Bank's ease of doing business ranking, India jumped 79 positions from 142 in 2014 to 63 in 2019. During the same time, China managed to leapfrog its position 90 from 90 in 2014 to 31 in 2019. Therefore, the need of the hour is a long-term concentrated effort which would catapult India to a place among the top 50 in the rankings of ease of doing business and to become a global player in manufacturing. Today's event is aimed at creating a platform to bring under one roof all the major players of India's exports ecosystem. At Dun & Bradstreet, our goal is to help grow the most valuable relationships in business with the help of our data and analytics. We have one of the largest commercial databases with over 400 million records derived from 30,000 data sources and with 5 million updates happening daily on our data. Since its beginnings, a very long time ago in 1841, may I remind you, Dun & Bradstreet has a proud heritage of providing indispensable content to the financial and business community across the globe. But perhaps what is even more important than the data and the content we provide is the trust that business has reposed in Dun & Bradstreet over the years. Coming back to the main highlights of today's proceedings, we are all eagerly looking forward to listening to Dr. Ajay Sai's and Professor Bernard Hockman's comments. Likewise, the Power Pack panel discussion holds a lot of promise in terms of valuable insights and takeaways for all of us. Also, as I mentioned before, we will be witnessing the digital launch of the first edition of Dun & Bradstreet's publication, Business Across Borders 2021, which will have listings and profiles of the leading exporters across India. These companies represent the very core of the Indian export ecosystem. I would like to congratulate all the companies being featured in the Business Across Borders 2021 publication. On behalf of Dun & Bradstreet and all my colleagues, I wish all of you the very best for the future. Before I close, I wish to extend my gratitude to Dr. Ajay Sai for having graced our event today. All of us are keen to listen to his perspective on India's export sector and the possible roadmap to financial and economic stability in the future. I'm also grateful to Professor Bernard Hockman for having graciously accepted our invitation to speak at this event. I'm certain that members of the audience will benefit immensely from his insights on the role that exporters can play in accelerating the economic growth of countries and of the world in general. A big thank you to all of our esteemed dignitaries and members of the panel for coming together to help make this event a promising one in terms of insights. We also like to thank our co-partner, Iron Exchange India Limited, and all our publication partners for contributing to the success of this grand virtual event. And last but not the least, I would like to thank each one of you, every member of the audience, for having shared your valuable time with us at this event. I hope all of you have a wonderful experience and get some great takeaways from the summit. Thank you once again and look forward to meeting you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for sharing your commendable insights with us. Well, our next speaker is someone who has a deep understanding of global trade and who has written extensively on topics like multilateral trading systems, trade in services, preferential trade agreements, and trade and investment policy. Dr. Bernard Hockman. Dr. Hockman is Professor and Director, Global Economics at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies, European University Institute in Florence, Italy. His prior positions include Director of the International Trade Department and Research Manager in the Development Research Group of the World Bank. He's been an economist in the GATT Secretariat and held visiting positions at Sciences Po Paris. Dr. Hoekman graduated from the Erasmus University Rotterdam, and he obtained his PhD in economics from the University of Michigan. He is a CEPR Research Fellow, where he also co-directs the Trade Policy Research Network, a Senior Associate of the Economic Research Forum for the Arab countries, Turkey and Iran, and a member of the World Economic Forum Global Action Council on Logistics and Supply Chains. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to have in our midst Professor Bernard Hoekman. Welcome, sir.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you in this session on discussing business across borders. What I'd like to do is spend a few minutes talking about the bigger picture in terms of what the policy environment is that is confronting firms who are working in the international environment, and in particular firms who are also interested in getting into global value chains, finding a niche in international trade. And I think here, one of the trends that has been happening over the last 10 years or so is increasing intervention by governments, increasing regulation of trade. And this has been reflected in a number of developments. It's been driven by a number of factors, including geopolitics, increasing tensions between the United States and China for one, but also between the European Union and China. A general sense that more regulation is needed of particular activities, in particular with respect to trade and services and the regulation of data flows. And on top of that, and we see this very clearly in the world we're living in today with COVID-19 lockdowns, is technological change, right? So there's been a steady pattern of technological developments which are making it easier for firms to do certain activities at home that used to be outsourced and vice versa. So there's a big shift going on in terms of what the incentives are for firms to outsource particular tasks and activities, and also that determine the choice of where that is done. And that creates both a lot of opportunities for firms who are looking to get into the international trade business, but also a lot of threats and challenges for firms, in particular firms who have already specialized in certain types of activities that are now going to become less interesting for large multinational companies to use because the technology is there to do that. So there's a substitution effect going on in terms of the types of, let's say, labor-intensive services, back office activities, business process management types of outsourcing, which is going to be coming under more pressure because of automation. But on the other hand, these technologies also facilitate this type of cross-border provision of services. And I think that is where there's a lot of opportunity. But as I will kind of elaborate a bit more in the rest of my intervention, that depends a lot on what governments do, including the government of India, given that you are focusing on Indian firms and the Indian context. So the stylized facts are well known. We're seeing an increasing number of measures being taken by governments around the world to either restrict or control foreign direct investments, trade in goods, trade in services. A very large share of trade now is affected by more measures than was the case before the global financial crisis. At the same time, we see a lot of intervention by governments to help firms compete in the international marketplace, in the domestic marketplace, and often those measures take the form of subsidies. So we have a lot of subsidies that have been given mostly by high-income countries, and that, of course, has greatly increased during the current year and a half or so as we are dealing with the the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has the potential to really tilt the playing field that confronts firms. So firms located in countries where there is much less support are going to be at a competitive disadvantage relative to firms that are located in countries where there is a lot of fiscal support, a lot of direct subsidization, either of activities, inputs, and so forth. So if you look, there's something called the Global Trade Alert, which is an international effort to monitor what governments are doing. And what that clearly shows is that more than 50% of all actions taken by governments since 2009 that potentially affect or distort trade take the form of subsidies. It's export support, it's through the tax system, it's direct fiscal grants. So this is one problem that really affects the global trading system, and that calls for international cooperation. Similarly, we see exactly the same thing in terms of how governments have been responding to COVID-19 in terms of trade policy. A large number of countries actually took trade restricting measures, restricting exports of personal protective equipment, medical supplies. Some countries took actions to control the exports of food. And again, all of that points to an incentive by governments to actually use trade policy as a way to achieve particular objectives, which of course is totally appropriate and is something governments should do. But at the same time, it has implications for trade, it has implications for investment, and therefore this is something firms should worry about and try and ensure that governments actually cooperate with each other, that they don't end up in a beggar thy neighbor type of situation and ultimately even a trade war. A lot of attention is being focused on both incentives for firms to reshore parts of production, so to shorten global value chains. Of course, a lot of attention is being focused on the effects of the various measures taken by governments to deal with COVID, but there's also longer term trends, which I think are important for firms to take into account in terms of the global environment. One of those has to do with data, the regulation of data, privacy regulation, consumer protection, which increasingly is becoming a big factor for firms and increasingly is becoming the focus of attention of governments. And here, the stylized fact is that different governments are doing different things. Some countries have open data policies. Some countries heavily control the cross-border flow of data. Many countries have a conditional flow regime where we have regulation in place. And all of that heterogeneity, all of these differences in terms of how governments deal with trade and services, cross-border flows of data, make it more difficult for firms to operate. And again, this calls for international cooperation between governments to try and agree on rules of the game, but also to try and agree on which standards are good enough so that firms can actually provide, especially digital services, across borders. And I think here, what I would end with in terms of my remarks is this is really something where governments need to engage with each other. And I think the stylized fact here is that in the case of India, the Indian government is really not participating very much in international efforts to try and agree on what the rules should be and to try and deal with the costs associated with the different approaches that are taken by governments and that have effects on international trade. There are ongoing negotiations in the WTO context among groups of countries. There's one on e-commerce. There's another one on domestic regulation of services. And there's a third one on measures that can be taken to help micro and small and medium-sized enterprises participate and benefit from international trade. India is not part of those discussions, and the Indian government indeed is very opposed to talking about these issues in the context of groups of willing and like-minded countries. And I think this is something for the business community to worry about, because the end result is going to be that you're not really represented in terms of the rules that might be negotiated. And that, I would argue, is a problem. So I think that would be my final ending point. There's a lot going on in terms of governments trying to deal with a variety of shocks, with pressures that consumers and citizens have with respect to data protection, health and safety of products, all of which create potentially frictions for firms. Firms need to then know what the different standards are in different countries And I think that's something where international cooperation can actually help kind of facilitate participation of firms in and capture international opportunities. But that does require a government that also participates in that. So let me end with that and wish you a good conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hochman, for sharing your views on the global trade scenario. Now, let's move to the much-awaited keynote session of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, let's roll out the red carpet for our guest of honor for the day, the one who heads the premier institution for promoting India's international business, Dr. Ajay Sahai. Dr. Ajay Sahai is the Director General and CEO of the Federation of Indian Export Organizations, which is the apex export promotion organization of the country, with direct membership of about 30,000 exporters from all over the country. Dr. Sahai was earlier joint DGFT in the policy division of the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, where he played a key role in the formulation of the foreign trade policy from 1996 to 2003. He was a member of a high-level task force of Government of India on EXM policy. Dr. Sahai specializes in agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures of WTO. He is a member of a high-powered committee on export promotion schemes constituted by the Department of Commerce. He has received accolades from the World Bank for his contribution to Ease of Doing Business report for 2016, 2017, and 2018. He has widely traveled, bringing with him ingredients of global exposure and providing critical inputs on India's export policies. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Ajay Sahai. Welcome, sir.
Exports play an extremely important role in any economy. In fact, no economy has been able to sustain a GDP growth of 8% plus without substantive growth in export by 15% or more. In fact, all those years in which India has clocked 8% plus GDP growth were the year where export growth was 15% plus, and converse is equally true. And therefore, if India is aiming to be a 5 trillion economy, exports have to be vibrant and they have to contribute to at least $1 trillion. Luckily for us, the COVID-19 though pushed number of things, but the global recovery has been much better than anybody expected. In fact, looking into the WTO forecast, in the best scenario, the global contraction was supposed to be 13%, but the figure which has come for now shows a contraction of just 7%. We also started very badly with export dipping by around 60% in April, but we have recovered, and in last 2 months of December and January, we are now showing a positive double-digit growth. Though, of course, we may not touch $300 billion in the current fiscal, but in the next fiscal, we should attempt to take our export to $350 billion. I always believe that so far as the demand side of export is concerned, it is all for the entrepreneurs, but government plays an extremely important role in providing competitiveness to export through supply side challenges. And unfortunately, during the COVID-19, the supply side challenges have further accentuated. We have container shortage, freights have gone high, and even there are frequent shutouts by the shipping company. The government of India did its bits by encouraging shipping line to bring more containers, and to some extent for a few weeks, the situation eased out at the western coast. The problem is still continuing on the eastern coast. But I think as a long-term roadmap, we should look into manufacturing of the containers. China is completely dominating container manufacturing, and if India is looking at increasing exports and at the same time stemming the flow of imports, container manufacturing would be required. The good thing is that government is looking into developing Bhavnagar in Gujarat for the container manufacturing. An added issue which has definitely now been of much concern to the exporter, not only of commodities and metal, but even for the value added, is the hike in the freight charges. To some destination, freight has gone up by around 400%. Generally, also the freight has increased by around 50%. I think India, if is looking towards $1 trillion exports, and I'm pretty sure by that The imports will also be around $1 trillion. We should look into developing a shipping line of our own, which should have a substantial share in global trade. Unfortunately, we have only Shipping Corporation of India, which is now also being disinvested, and that their share is just 5%. India every year spend around $65 billion in transport services also, which is roughly 1/3 of our total bill. I feel that the uncertainty is the biggest challenge which Indian exporters are facing, and unfortunately these challenges have further aggravated in last few months with the little uncertainty on the policy front also. We have seen that exporters are struggling to get the benefits of some of the schemes for as early as 1st of April 2019. It is equally applicable for both goods and services. I'm sure that now, since the budget period is over, government will be shortly allocating the benefits so that it flows down to the industry. Otherwise, it is creating huge amount of problem, particularly for MSME segment. So far as the new schemes of the RODTEP is concerned, the scheme has been announced, but yet the rates are not there. This is a very precarious situation for any exporter who is looking into finalizing his contract, on what basis he should contract, whether he should take a benefit of 2%, 1%, 3%, is a very difficult question. And for many commodities, we are seeing that the entire business is being worked out on a profit of 2 to 3%. I'm pretty sure that government would be providing these rates very shortly. A bigger concern for all us has been the budget allocation for the scheme. The union budget has allocated 13,000 crore. We are of the view that since the RODTEP is a WTO compatible scheme and India has no longer any luxury to bring any scheme which does not fit into the WTO discipline, we should provide adequate funds to that, whether that funds would be of 30,000 or 40,000. We should not be looking into that. We should provide the competitiveness to export, bearing in mind that in post-pandemic period, the competition will be further toughened, and many countries are providing much more support to their exporters, and we should not be lagging at this point of time. We also are very conscious of the fact that India has now graduated from the special and differential treatment which was available after reaching per capita GNP of $1,000 for last 2 years, 2017-18, and therefore many of the schemes which are presently being in operation will have to undergo changes. We are keenly awaiting for the new foreign trade policy 2021 to 2026 because that will provide a roadmap to that. The government also will be having a difficult choice because many of the schemes of the government has already been put under radar, and I'm pretty sure that there is not much scope to bring the its adherence to the WTO norms unless substantial change takes in the scheme. For example, in the special economic zone, since the zones work on export principle, we need to look into whether we can convert them into an economic conclave so that any manufacturer, when he sits into the special economic zone, he can export, he can supply in the domestic market, and if he supplies into domestic market, the duty should be charged, and when he export, duty in any case is exempted to him. For the EOU scheme also, we have to look into whether the new scheme of the customs bonding, which is now in operation, can it replace the EOU scheme, because the scheme provides much more flexibility than what is under the EOU scheme. There is a question mark over the EPCG scheme also, since the WTO doesn't allow any exemption or remission of duty on the capital goods. We should look into reducing the duty on the capital goods. It's a difficult call for the government because capital goods imports are contributing sizably to the revenue, and therefore, if the government brings down the duty, not only it affects the exchequer, but it also puts the domestic capital goods manufacturer in a difficult situation. We are seeing similar more stories in other electronics products also. I personally feel that a scheme like PLI will help India to attract investment in some of the key technologies, key sectors also. And over a period of time, India will look into these opportunities for exports. This is a time where India, the GVCs are now under complete realignment. But to enter into the global value chain, we need to look into some of the issues which have affected in the past. And in fact, India is no longer a significant player in GVC, except to some extent in automobile, gems and jewelry, and pharmaceuticals. If we want to enter the GVC, it is important that customs duties are brought down, the logistics trade facilitation, and as a contributory factor, I think we should have vibrant FTAs also. So far as the logistics cost is concerned, I think the kind of focus which has come on the infrastructure, more so in the union budget, where we are talking about supporting our infrastructure, and that will also bring down the logistics cost. We are expecting the logistics policy also to be announced by the Department of Commerce. The kind of focus which has come on the logistics, particularly after the GST, including giving infrastructure to many of the logistics, particularly on the warehouses, then the Bharatmala and Sagarmala project, dedicated freight corridor. These initiatives will definitely help India. Trade facilitation is equally important for all of us, and it's good that India is not only meeting its commitment on the WTO on trade facilitation, but we are going an extra mile to provide some additional benefit also to trade and industry, which is the need of the hour. We have taken remarkable measures like direct port delivery and direct port entry for the shipment, which has reduced the entire time taken in clearance of the cargo. Custom has now come up with the authorized economic operator scheme, and good thing is that over a period of time, we have thousands of authorized economic operators who are now available in the country, and these kinds of initiatives has helped India also to increase its ranking in trading across segment of the World Bank, and I'm pretty sure this is something which continues in future also. The issue of FTA is something which has definitely affected our exports, but it's a difficult choice which we as an industry provide to the government, because any negotiation has to be of give and take. But good thing is that India is looking into the possibility of engaging itself with US, EU, UK, Australia and New Zealand. We have seen that very recently we have gone for a free trade agreement with Mauritius, but I'm pretty sure that if India engage with these large economies, this will benefit export, particularly of the employment intensive sectors of exports. I always believe that India's export strategy has to be two-pronged. The one is to focus on the sunrise sector of export, maybe pharmaceutical, automobile, biotechnology, new technologies, and other is on the traditional sectors of exports like textile, leather, handicraft, carpet, because these sectors are equally important, not only for generating foreign exchange, but more so for creating jobs into the country. And any economic policy also should aim at creating jobs, particularly in a country like India, where we have defined the conventional economic transition, moving from an agriculture economy directly to a service-oriented economy, bypassing the manufacturing sector. So I'm pretty sure that these kinds of initiatives which the government is taking will help the exports to come on track. The global situation will take its time to be back. We are seeing new variants coming into some parts of the globe, will continue to be under some kind of threats, and therefore international mobility may be affected even in next 1 year or so. Virtual and the digitization is the option, and we have seen how the digitization has helped each organization in the past. Whatever may not have been done by any organization in the last 5 years, in the last 5 months or 6 months, they have done more than what they were required to do. This is something which is here to stay. Even when the pandemic is over, I'm pretty sure the virtual show which are being organized are here to stay. It may be replaced by the hybrids exhibitions also, because I think looking into the convenience and cost effectiveness, these shows are equally important, particularly when in the technology you are providing the exact description and specification of that. So I'm bullish on India's exports. I'm pretty sure that if government addresses the supply side constraints, our entrepreneurs can take India to a stage where we can look for 5% of global trade in next 10 years or so. So I'm bullish on Indian exports. I'm pretty sure this kind of initiative which DNB has taken will give further thought process to that, to concretize into it to actual strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sahai, for sharing your insightful perspective with us. And now, the moment which we all have been eagerly waiting for. It's finally the time to launch the inaugural edition of the publication Dun & Bradstreet's Business Across Borders 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the achievements of the Indian export fraternity. Keeping in mind their pivotal role, Dun & Bradstreet, the leading global provider of B2B data, insights, and AI-driven platforms, is pleased to announce the launch of Business Across Borders 2021. Besides the overview of the Indian export sector, opportunities, and the future roadmap, the publication also includes profiles and listing of India's leading exporters. I request our guests for today to please join in this grand digital launch of the publication. Thank you all for being a part of this grand digital launch. We now move on to another interesting discussion of today's event, the fireside chat session with the Economic Advisor, Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, Mr. Praveen Mahato. Mr. Mahato is a 1992 batch Indian Economic Service Officer and has more than 28 years of experience. Mr. Mahato started his career from Directorate of Agriculture and Statistics. He then moved to the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance. He also served as Director in the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, where he accomplished several important tasks, such as announcing a credit package for MSMEs, ensuring significant growth and coverage under the Credit Guarantee Scheme for MSMEs, and releasing the Prime Minister's Task Force report on the MSME sector. It was in December 2010 that Mr. Mahato moved to Niti Aayog as Director, PPP and Infrastructure and was later promoted to Advisor PPP in June 2014. He was given additional charge of the Project Appraisal and Management Division in March 2015 and has since continued to hold both charges at Niti Aayog. Currently, Mr. Mahato is serving as a Director in Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, where he heads WTO Trade Negotiations Committee and also handles matters related to India's participation in the WTO Public Forum, Inter-Parliamentary Union, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Praveen Mahato. And we also have with us Ms. Naina Acharya, Leader, Learning and Economic Insights Group at Dun & Bradstreet, who would anchor this chat today. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Praveen Mahato and Ms. Naina Acharya.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In continuation to this fabulous Business Across Borders conference scheduled today, under the very apt theme, Carving a Niche in the Global Value Chain, to give more insights, we have with us today Shri Praveen Mahato, IES, Economic Advisor, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Welcome, sir, and thank you so much for taking time from your schedule.
Thank you.
Indeed, it is a pleasure to have Mr. Praveen and also understand that what is in store for all our exporter fraternity today to be able to create a niche for themselves in the global scenario, and also to understand that in order to have a sustainable, agile and flexible business, what is it that the government has intended for us, and what is it that we will need to do as key stakeholders to expand our global footprint. So in continuation with this objective in mind, we have Mr. Praveen who will help us get some insights. And my first question to you, Mr. Praveen, is that, in the pandemic situation combined with several geopolitical developments that has disrupted value chains from across the globe, what is your view on the changing landscape? It will also be interesting for us to know what are the threats and opportunities that this situation poses to India, especially with respect to the international trade, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. As we are all aware, the COVID, along with the other geopolitical developments that have been taking place in the last 1 to 2 years, it has really impacted very badly both the global output as well as the trade. The IMF latest report, it says that the global output is expected to contract by more than 3.5% during 2020. Similarly, the WTO has also, forecast a decline in the world by more than 9% during 2020. So the scenario is not very good, but at the same time, it is not very gloomy either. What we have seen is that most of the economies, barring few, Vietnam and China, etc., all economies have witnessed a negative growth during 2020. However, in the period, what we have seen is that from December onwards, there has been a reversal. India also witnessed a negative growth during the period April to November. However, from December onwards, we have seen a reversal. And during January, the figures are very, very promising. And we have export growing by almost 6.2%. And we envision a similar trend will also be witnessed during the remaining part of the current financial year and next year. The WTO also in its forecast has said that the world trade is expected to grow by 7.2% during this period. So the part that in the coming months, what we can expect is a increase in our exports as well as our economic growth. So that is going to help us further. As far as threat is concerned, one area that was a problem area for us was the informal sector. The ILO in its report has also said that the global labor wages have decreased by more than 11%, and almost 150 million people are expected to go into poverty. So those kind of reports were really very scary, and government had taken several steps, including the package of 1.7 trillion rupees, specially aimed for welfare of this vulnerable section of the population. So we expect that this will certainly help them. As far as opportunities is concerned, there are two sectors which have shown really very, very, and they have withstood the pandemic also. And these sectors are one, the pharmacy sector, where India has supplied medicines to more than 150 countries. And now we are engaged in supplying vaccines to we have already supplied to 30 countries, and that is growing. So this is really one sector which is expected to grow further in the coming years. The other sector where we see opportunities is the agriculture sector. Despite all the restrictions, etc., the exports in the agriculture sector has grown quite significantly. And several commodities have shown increase even during the COVID period. So we see that while there are areas where we have problems, but at the same time, the challenges are also throwing opportunities in other areas.
Absolutely. So because at this moment, it's important for everyone to also identify the sunrise sectors and see what more we can do, in the global landscape. Having said that, sir, when we look at the export of fraternity per se and the rules, regulations, and the policies that are made for them, somewhere there is a feeling that last 1 year has clearly showed that the rules of the games have changed, and therefore it is important to kind of relook at whatever we have created. So in your 7-year stint, sir, in the Ministry of MSME, and where you have supervised the implementation of the credit policy, the credit guarantee scheme, and the microfinance scheme, what roles have such schemes played basically in strengthening the MSME sector, and how have these schemes basically supported the Indian exporters for the MSME sector? So that's the first part of my question, sir. And then after that, the second part of my question is what are some of the key developments in terms of financial support that was made to the the exporter fraternity, before that? And were there any changes? Are there any changes being planned considering what has happened in the last 1 year? So there are two parts of my question, sir, and I would appreciate if you could share your thoughts.
See, you have very rightly pointed out, affordable credit is very important for not only MSMEs growth, but also to make them competitive in the global environment. So credit has been one of the focus areas of the government, and towards this, however, MSMEs face several challenges. One big challenge is, they don't have collaterals. And whenever they go to banks, they had to banks used to ask them collaterals. So the credit guarantee scheme, when it was launched, it was with this aim that all those MSMEs which did not have collaterals with them, they can also obtain loans from the financial institutions. And so this credit guarantee scheme, which provides for collateral-free loans from the financial institution, was conceptualized, and it has really grown over the years and helped several MSMEs in obtaining credit. Secondly, government has been announcing credit packages for the MSMEs where targets for credit growth are stipulated. And so it basically make MSME-friendly schemes so that more credit could be given to the MSMEs. So these schemes, policies have really helped in making affordable credit available to MSMEs. Insofar as export sector is concerned, the Department of Commerce is implementing a scheme, namely interest equalization scheme. Now it provides for interest subvention up to 5% for MSMEs as well as other exporters. So it basically helps them in remaining competitive in the global environment. Similarly, we have other schemes that we run through ECGC and NEIA. Now, to ensure that the coverage under the ECGC and NEIA are expanded, what we did was the corpus of both these ECGC as well as NEIA have been expanded, and so that the cover under these schemes could be enhanced and more number of exporters could be covered. As far as changes that you mentioned in your last part, government has looked at the COVID period and the problems that are being faced by the exporters, and to see that the insurance cover that they get at this point of time, we are also contemplating to enhance that insurance coverage from 60% to 90%, and therefore that is something which is under consideration of the government, and I think soon we'll hear something about that. Thank you.
Well, brilliant, sir. It's actually assuring to most of our audiences out here that if the government is taking into consideration the last 12 to 15 months and seeing what has happened and how it has impacted their businesses per se, it gives them an assurance that moving forward they'll be safeguarded. So that's very good to know, Mr. Praveen. My next question, and more importantly, the last question of our discussion revolves around the challenges. And sir, needless to say, the government has introduced several reforms facilitating and enabling a good business, ecosystem. Some of them, and some examples that come at the top of my mind are, relaxation of foreign direct investment norms, etc. However, according to a report released by Niti Aayog, India's average score on the Export Preparedness Index, that is the EPI, is just about 39 out of 100. Now, India is a country which is seen like a sunrise, economy by people across the globe. It seems like it's a long way to go, especially to become, an export-based super economy. And major drawbacks obstructing the export preparedness in many of the states, and there's an anticipated huge gap in the export infrastructure and many other challenges. What, according to your view, Mr. Praveen, are say the top 3 challenges that need to be addressed, immediately? And if it would be great to also assure our exporter fraternity that the government is really taking stringent steps to address these challenges. If you could please share your views, Mr. Praveen, that would be very good.
You have rightly pointed out, and government is also seized of the issue of infrastructure being one of the problem areas. So the 3 challenges that we see One is that even where you have infrastructure which is available, but because of last mile connectivity issues that are there, it takes a lot of time for the business to start up, and so it has a lot of issues because of that. So one focus area of the government has been creation of competitive plug and play investment environment. And towards this, what the government is doing is that we have created a lot of SEZs, and we are basically trying to undertake reforms in the SEZs to make these SEZs more attractive for investments. Similarly, we have industrial corridors and cluster development as one of the strategy tools for having world-class infrastructure for industries. So that is one. Second thing, as you would be aware, is that in the department, one logistics division has been created, and that has been created mainly to reduce the logistics cost of the business. And so that that division is working, under a very senior officer at the level of special secretary, and they are working on several fronts. One area is that they are working on a national logistic policy, which is almost under finalization. Secondly, they are also having a comprehensive platform for integrating logistic related portals. Then they are also into having a national master plan for logistics. They are also having a logistic workforce strategy. So on a number of fronts they are working, and I'm 100% sure that once these processes are complete, it will give a boost to our exports as well as to our businesses, and it will ensure a reduced logistics cost for them. So that is the second area. Third area is about having a physical infrastructure kind of a thing for the exporters. So we have 2-3 schemes in that respect. One is we have TIE scheme, which is trade infrastructure for exporters. So under that, 40 projects have been identified, 9 have been completed, while the implementation is the remaining ones are under implementation, and we hope to complete them very quickly. The second thing is we are having common facility center for gems and jewelry sector. So over there also we have identified 13 CFCs. 4 are already under operational. Another 4 will be under operational very soon. And so these kind of interventions the government is making to ensure that the infrastructure that is required for making them competitive are available, and more take advantage of these world-class infrastructure that is provided by government, and enhance our exports.
It's wonderful to listen to you, Mr. Praveen, because it just gives a lot of confidence to many of our audiences out here who are struggling to survive. And when they can see that there is a lot being done by our government to ensure that we make them more resilient, we give them more inroads to create business, and expand their business. We first allow them to stand on their own feet, and then support them with infrastructure to run along with it. It gives a lot of confidence to them, sir. And I cannot thank you enough, Mr. Praveen, because these words of assurance will help all our audiences out here to just go and do what they are best at. And of course, they have the support of the government. So I thank you, Mr. Praveen, for actually sharing your thoughts and being extremely honest and candid about whatever the government is doing. Thank you very much, Mr. Praveen. It was fabulous speaking with you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure to join this forum. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Praveen Mahato and Ms. Naina Acharya for this engagement. Now, let's gain some more expert insight on the impact of the pandemic on the Indian export sector, opportunities and threats for Indian exporters in the post-pandemic world, and the role of exporters in making India self-reliant. Let's dive right into the conversation with experts on the very pertinent theme, carving a niche in the global value chain, moderated by Dun & Bradstreet's Global Chief Economist, Dr. Arun Singh. Dr. Singh, a professional economist, has more than 15 years of experience in macroeconomic research and analytics. His area of work has spanned quantitative and qualitative economic research, econometric modeling, commodity research, and industry research across a wide spectrum of sectors. Broad areas covered under economic research and analytics include real sector, public finance, monetary and fiscal policy, external sector, infrastructure, social sector, country, and company risk rating. Before his tenure at Dun & Bradstreet India, Dr. Singh was with the Tata Group, where he handled projects on in-depth analysis and research on various economic issues and was an expert in macroeconomic modeling, forecasting, and demand assessment. Well, the esteemed panel today features our first speaker, Shri Ajay Kumar Srivastava, Additional DGFT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Ajay Kumar Srivastava is currently working as an additional DGFT for Ministry of Commerce and Industry. He has a master's degree in business administration from Indian School of Business. Mr. Srivastava has authored many books on subjects related to export and trade policies and also writes as a guest editor at leading English business dailies like Times of India, Business Line, etc. Our second panelist today is Ms. Prerna Joshi, Deputy Director, Economic Division, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India. Ms. Prerna Joshi is currently serving as Deputy Director for Economic Division in Ministry of Finance for Government of India. She had started her career in Multilateral Institutions Division in Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, where she handled World Bank assisted projects. She is also responsible for charting out an action plan to roll out direct benefit transfer across the country. Also gracing the panel is Mr. Ashish Soparkar, Managing Director, Make Money Organics Limited. Mr. Ashish Soparkar is the Managing Director of Make Money Organics Limited. He holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Maharaja Sayaji Rao University, Baroda. He currently oversees the corporate affairs and finance operations of his company. Mr. Soparkar has more than 42 years of experience in the dyes and pigments industry and more than 20 years experience in agrochemicals industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming all the esteemed members of our panel.
Dear panelists and audience, welcome to today's panel discussion, Carving a Niche in the Global Value Chain. It's my privilege to welcome you all. If you look at exports, and that's what basically today we are going to discuss, and we are going to discuss one subject basically is very important, very critical, not just today. In fact, for many decades, we have achieved many success, but the need of the hour, how we can create that ecosystem, that success is magnified and the success is manifold. The exports, no doubt, I mean, we all are aware, is highly correlated with, and in fact, it's very critical to India's growth story. And last 3 decades, it is basically outcome of that. If I have to look at data from 1995 to 2018, India's overall export growth averaged more than 30% annually. That was the 3rd best performance in the world amongst the top 50 exporters. Most important, India's manufacturing exports for long considers India's Achilles heel grew more than 12%. And that was the 3rd best performance in the world. And that was nearly twice the world average. In each of these 3 decades which I'm talking about, in fact, since 1990s, export contributed about 1/3 of the overall growth. As a result of that, India's export to GDP is close to 20%, which is twice as high as, during 1990s. But that's a positive. But there are concern side, there are challenges to the sectors. I mean, there are few of that are, there's a low level of SME participation. There's information asymmetry intersection. There's a low level of digitalization, and there are many, list goes on. In fact, if I have to talk about some opportunity which we can create, or maybe I can say they still not lost everything. It's just tough fight sectors in the economy. There's textile, chemicals, metals, machineries, automobile sectors. The combined export potential of these 5 sectors is something around $125 billion US. Look at that. And that's basically 40% of total exports during 2019. That's important, and in fact, it's important that we identify the policy priorities to close this gap by nurturing our export community, and that's the need of the hour. With that context, we basically schedule this conversation, and we welcome all our esteemed panelists to share their views and perspective and throw some light and give the guidance that where we are headed and how we can take the this opportunity forward. For today's panel discussion, I welcome Sri Ajay Kumar Srivastava ji. He is a additional DGFT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Our second speaker for the panel discussion is Ms. Prerna Joshi. She is Deputy Director, Economic Division, Department of Economic Affairs. A third speaker of the panel discussion is Mr. Ashish Soparkar. He is Managing Director of Megmoney Organics Limited. Welcome everyone for the today's panel discussion. I'm looking forward to have a great conversation and great interaction with all three of you. Today we are going to discuss about the impact of COVID-19 on the global trade and the way forward, policy intervention required from the government side to make Indian exporters self-reliant, trade finance for Indian exporters, skill upgradation and technology upgradation for the Indian exporters, role of export promotion councils, opportunity for Indian exporters, and the most critical and talked about subject is the basically impact of government's PLI schemes in the overall ecosystem. With that, I will invite our first speaker, Mr. Ashish Soparkar, Managing Director of Megmoney Organics Limited. So, I mean, we just talked about overall impact of COVID-19 on an economy, and we all know that impacted businesses across globe, especially exporters in developing economies. In fact, after witnessing a steep fall in export, businesses have started showing a promising recovery. In that context, we are asking ourselves, you are asking yourself, and in fact, the overall things happening is that, is the worst finally over, or there are some issue we need to be cognizant of that? Sir.
General consciousness says that the worst should be over, but the question should be answered by different set of people from different organizations. It should include medical people, it should include scientists, researchers, etc. But as more and more vaccination is taking place, and more people are not so much afraid of coronavirus, as well as because of constant government initiative like wearing a mask and other things, people are taking more safer positions. I believe the worst should be over. And look at the different set of industries. So industries, those who are very badly hit, are almost 50 to 70% back to normal. So I believe the worst is over. Now we should try and progress from here. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish, in fact, I hope the same thing, Mr. Soparkar. Thanks for your comment. And in fact, I do believe worst is over because we have many curves emerged last year when we're talking about recovery space, V curve, W shape, L shape, K shape, and there are many things. So I think we went to the route of V shape, which is great, but let's see how we are able to sustain. And I think to sustain, government have done a lot, and that's basically, I will invite Ms. Prerna Joshi for that government have done a lot, and there is more expectation coming from the government side. In fact, we all know that India is most important player in the global economic landscape. The government of India has been working the fine balance between our exports and with other countries to increase the contribution towards economic development and towards the global market and towards the global market growth. Ma'am, how you see that, and in fact, how can Indian policy makers, government can provide a support to export sectors to ensure that we make that sustainable progress, or the growth which you're basically expecting from the export community, that's maintained?
I think government has already done enough as far as support to export community and to the industrial sector is concerned. 2020 has been an unprecedented year, wherein which has actually thrown formidable economic challenge not only to the entire world, but it also affected the value chains across the globe. So, and Indian policy makers, they have taken a very prudent path of going for short-term pain for a long-term gain, and which is witnessed in their V-shaped recovery also. And this is also very evident from the various structural reforms which the government has undertaken, like you name it, either it's in the field of agriculture, labor, and the various schemes like RODTEP scheme, PLI schemes. So government has already taken various steps in this direction. In fact, our recent union budget has a specific emphasis on expanding the infrastructure. So I feel that there is already enough which the government has undertaken in this regard. However, there are still few areas wherein I personally feel we can provide export support, or that can actually lead to a more export growth in the Indian economy. First and foremost, I feel that there has to be, in order to give a durable push to our export growth, we should get into free trade agreements with some key strategically important economies. And these potential FTAs, they need to take cognizance of not only the domestic strengths and the global opportunities, but also the emerging geopolitical landscape in the post-pandemic period. Such FTAs, they should also facilitate our participation in the global value chain. And the countries and the regions which should be identified, it should not only be the potential marketplace for our domestic goods and services, but they should also have also provide us a scope to enhance our domestic competitiveness, especially in the sectors which are covered in PLI scheme. With some quick examples which come to my mind is that I think that the post Brexit era, in this scenario, it is very wise for us to get into separate FTAs with the UK and with EU, because this is not only going to boost our bilateral trade and investment relations, but it will also pave the way for greater collaboration in the areas of scientific research. Apart from that, I think due to our favorable demographic dividend, Africa also offers immense potential for exports and investment from Indian firms. Apart from that, I feel that neighborhood first policy, which is also evident in our recent vaccine diplomacy, that is another very important step which India is already working upon. I think these are few areas wherein I think FTAs would be able to promote export growth. Besides this, I feel that India's tariff structure, it can be made more rationalized, it can be made more simpler and predictable, and of course in a phased manner. The tariff structure should try to prevent the inverted duty structure issue in this, wherein the final good the tariff on the final good is lesser than the tariff on the intermediate goods. So that makes our manufacturing relatively uncompetitive. Further, I would also like to mention that our Indian diplomatic missions abroad, they need to play a more important role in trade promotion and in marketing India as a preferred investment destination.
Yeah, I think, Ms. Prerna Joshi, you're right, because I think one element is very critical, and I have seen, and I have in fact working with the corporate for so long, that marketing element is very critical, and that we need to basically doing. And there are a couple of initiatives which basically talked about, and I'm saying, and we all cognizant of the government initiatives towards the exporter and then economy. And your perspective was right. That was helpful, and that thanks for that. With that, I'll basically will come to Mr. Ajay Kumar, and that's very, very, very important and critical point from growth perspective. And why I'm saying that, in DNB, we have basically talking to MSME community for last 20 years. There are many challenges they face. Some of them are exporters, some of the manufacturers, they're selling the domestic. But then the problem area they side, it's differ, but end of the day is basically coming what you call the access to the finance. And then access to the finance, when you talk about the exporter, they talk about the trade, many the working capital, many the basic financing, that many things. In fact, all 20 years, that one aspect have not changed. This continuously, constantly in every survey, it was coming as a loud and clear. And in fact, if you have to look at the Indian exporter front, Indian export space is made largely of MSME, no doubt about that. We all know that, who face unique challenge, in fact, of assessing working capital and other finance I'm talking about. What intervention are required by policymaker to ensure the sufficient financing is available to the export sector? Because end of the day, they don't want to hold on some of the export order because the money or the trade finance or some concern happening in outside country are going to restrict that one. What intervention requires, sir?
Thanks, Arunji. So before talking about the fresh interventions, let's first try to understand what's there on the table right now. So we have a pre-shipment and post-shipment credit scheme. Almost all the exporters, they try to avail of this scheme once they have a firm export order. It's a very popular scheme and bridges the gap in the working capital. So exporters buy raw materials, inputs, machinery, etc. using this. Then we have a very unique scheme, interest equalization scheme. Here you get loans for export purposes at the rate which is 5% lower than the market rate. It's available to all the MSMEs for all their products. So most of the MSMEs use this. I invite all the MSMEs to try this. 5% lower, it solves all the problems of the capital. And then if you compare the rates, it brings the rates comparable to the best of the world, I must say. We can forget about Japan where rates are negative or some such country. Otherwise, 4 to 5% is the average rate around the world, so that solves the problem. Then MSMEs talk that if they don't have collateral, many banks, they don't lend. For that, government last year they introduced a scheme. It's called Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme. The scheme was expanded. The fund allocation for this scheme was expanded in this budget, and now it's 15,700 crore rupees. So the scheme that government assures banks that it will repay in case any MSME defaults. So these three schemes, they are presently on the table. But the question was, what else can be done? So I personally believe we can try a scheme. It goes like this. The exporters, for many of them, their working capital is blocked because the input tax credit refunds, they take time. It's a major worry of the exporters. So I envisage a scheme. There is no proposal at the government side. We are just discussing here the scheme. So I thought a scheme can be thought where we put say 10 to 15,000 crore rupees, and as soon as the input tax credit is due, it could be credited to the exporter's account. And the moment GSTN calculates the rates, then the fund can be replenished. So the same fund can be used in perpetuity. I think it will be solving great problem for the exporters. And to functionalize the scheme, we need the connections with the GSTN, IceGate at the customs, and banks. And I think it's highly doable. So I invite friends from DNB maybe to give a thought to this. And at the government side also, I think it will be a good scheme for the exporters. So that's all I have to say on this question. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Srivastava. I think it's a great time, and we'll be happy to work with you to ensure that we come up a mechanism to ensure that the sectors are getting a fund and getting the support which you required for this one. Now, I'm coming back to you, Ms. Joshi, about and I was saying that earlier that government introduction of the PLI schemes and that's impact on the ground, basically the production linked incentive scheme, which basically across 10 sectors, 10 specific sectors to ensure that our manufacturers are globally competitive and attract investment in the areas of core competencies. And that's basically what we're talking about. How do you see this boosting export from India?
I think a lot is being talked about PLI schemes already. It is everywhere, and it is expected to give a significant boost to India's manufacturing. How is it expected to boost exports? I would like to see it from two perspectives. One, let's say whenever I am interested in boosting my exports, I would like to see whether it has a demand in our capacity to produce and sell the quality products at the competitive prices. So let's say first, if I am seeing it from the perspective of demand, I would really like to commend PLI scheme with respect to the kind of identification of the sectors and the products it has done. So, let's start with automobile industries, automobiles, pharmaceuticals. These form the core industries which has high demand. Then we have our electronic and technology products. We have Internet of Things devices. We have ACC batteries. These are all high demand and high technology products who has high potential demand. And in fact, there is a study by World Bank which came in February 2021 only, which says that global trade growth is expected to be higher by 2%, only because there is a more adoption of digital technologies. So this is an era of technology, and by giving more technology products and by covering such products under PLI, I think the demand, the potential for the products which are being covered under PLI is huge. So the demand side is, I feel, is being taken care of. As far as the supply side is concerned, what PLI does is it basically incentivizes the incremental sales. So when I am incentivizing the incremental sales, that means I am also incentivizing the production, and the producer is the manufacturer. It is incentivized to achieve size and scale, and with the scale there will come cost effectiveness. With this cost effectiveness, the manufacturer will be able to compete globally. In addition, the scheme also attracts the foreign manufacturers to shift their base to India and to compete globally. So this entire cycle is going to promote production, manufacturing, will spur investment, will also lead to more benefits in the entire value chain. It will not only be the benefits to the specific manufacturing firm which will be selected, but to the entire value chain which is associated with that particular manufacturing firm. And in the process, the firms, since the incentive is on the sales, the firms will not only be catering to the domestic demand, but will also be moving overseas markets and will have more exports. So I feel that this is the way in which the PLI scheme will be boosting the exports. And in addition, I would also like to say that PLI scheme should not be seen standalone. It needs to be seen in conjunction with the slew of measures which the government has undertaken, the structural measures in terms of ease of doing business, and redefinition of MSMEs, the labor reforms which has been undertaken. All these in culmination are expected to boost the exports of India.
No, well said by I think Ms. Joshi, and that's and that will be helpful to our audience, because you rightly said it's much talked about subject, PLI. I mean, last few months we have seen and everyone talking about, and in fact I've seen the manufacturers trying to take a benefit with these schemes, but sometimes audience want to understand what is the basic integrity behind that, and you explained so well, and I'm hoping that they got their perspective clear. Now, coming back to you, Mr. Srivastava, and very critical and very important point, where basically we're talking about the role of export promotion councils towards the promoting, Indian exporters. How crucial is the role played by various EPCs in promoting Indian goods and services across globe? How can their network be utilized better or more engaged to explore ways to find new markets for innovative Indian products and actively promote them to overseas buyers? I know Ms. Joshi talked about various free trade agreement, finding a neighbor, and other area, and she was basically talking about the diplomat. What in that context, what the role of export promotion councils can do to harness that capability which we have?
Thanks, Arunji. So I consider role of Export Promotion Council to be very crucial for promotion of exports. And to make it clear why I'm saying we have to look at the export and import process, say, from some distance. Let's take a helicopter view. So we say an exporter has to deal with two country systems, regulatory systems and the business systems of the two countries. He needs to have understanding of the, say, banking and custom systems of not only his own country, but of the buyer's country also. He has to deal with the buyer. First, he has to locate the buyer, and then he has the choice out of 200 countries where he should focus. So if I put it in perspective, then an exporter, consider you are a new exporter. Then if you are an exporter, you need to know about the incentive schemes, go to DGFT, you need to know about the customs processes, very arcane, to know about how to book a container. You have to find out a new buyer, which country to focus on, what are non-tariff barriers. Hundreds of such questions are there. There is no one single agency in the private sector or the government sector who can guide the exporter. And a new exporter without a particular professional help, he will be lost. It will be difficult to start the business. But I know many of the EPCs, they provide this service in a very competent way. Not all, but many of them. So they tell exporter for a particular product which country to focus. They may help with the broad list of the buyers to contact in the first instance. Then internally, they can help with the banks, with the customs, with the DGFT. So I say they are the single point is top. So they are very crucial and they have to be strengthened more. And if you say what more can be done, then I say that everything is getting fast. So trade also. So real-time inquiries are generated. They have to be offloaded to the suppliers, to the exporters at almost real time. So some initiatives have been taken by a collaboration of, say, Department of Commerce, PO, and our trade missions abroad. Prerna mentioned about the trade missions. So a very welcome move, very welcome step has been taken 2-3 years back, wherein all the trade missions have been provided an electronic platform at the Indian Trade Portal run by PO with the support of Department of Commerce. So all the trade missions, as soon as they get a business, exports or tender inquiry, they put it on the portal, and all the Indian exporters, they can access that in real time. Many of the export promotion councils, in addition, they host buyer-seller meets, reverse buyer-seller meet. Many of them, they have electronic platform for trading of the products. So they are doing their role, but I think everyone needs more strengthening. The role is very crucial. We cannot ignore that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Srivastava, for your perspective on that. And I do understand that the role of government, role of policymaker, role of export promotion council is very critical, and in fact is rightly, because export community needs support. And in fact, that ecosystem is not going to work without the government intervention, who's going to set the ball rolling, who's going to decide the course of the action. And that's one side of the right-hand side of the things. If I look at, I mean, in DNB, we have developed what we call the COVID-19 impact index, that's called a COVID-19 disruption tracker, wherein we reach out to, in fact, we do for more than 200 countries, that where's the disruption, and basis that disruption, that basically whether company is under the lockdown, whether company is not under the lockdown, that containment zone with the operation and all that, we come up with the index, and they say that one point of time there was pretty much everything is disrupted. 70% of the global companies got disrupted because of the lockdown, and disrupted everything on the planet. Today, I mean, it went to 30% in interim. Now it's again going up because of some countries going to the second wave, some countries going to the third wave, and now it's again 40% in fact of the companies impacted or under lockdown or under containment zone. That has impacted the supply chain, and in fact, with that, I will move to Mr. Soparkar, and that's you're on ground and you're basically facing that stuff. Most of the exporter had to press the reset button and have had an opportunity to look at their supply chain and logistic and the fragility in that supply chain. We have seen that when most of the vendor went bankrupt or basically packed the bag and ran away, and most of the customer basically there's no visibility around that. Looking at that, what do you think are the biggest hurdle for Indian exporter in the post-COVID-19 world, and how can one overcome that, these challenges to ensure that it's normal, things are moving with better or with much success?
First of all, I like to thank Government of India, Ajay Bhai and Prerna Ben for doing excellent service to the industry. They have managed a US dollar rate to Indian rupees so well that previously, when our biggest competitor is China, we are around 12 to 15% favorably placed with China in 1 year by way of currency. So Indian exporters have a great possibility of exporting more. Also, Narendra Bhai Modi is changing image of the country. Just think of that way. If you go to a shop to buy pencil, and all pencils are same price from Japan, Bangladesh, India, or China, which country pencil will you buy? You will buy pencil from, of course, Japan. In same way with Germany, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, movie camera is there. The same $800 is the price. Which country you will buy? You will buy from Germany, because those countries have made quality products and branded themselves well. India needs a branding. And if India gets better and better branding, then maybe we can take a mileage of COVID vaccine gifts to other countries, or currently or gradually we improve our country's image by even exporting movies, by TV serials, by our trade missions, by our cultural missions, by our ambassadors, etc. If the country's image is moved, I am very sure that India we represent 15% of the world population. So 15% of the world trade must happen in India, even if we are an average citizen of the world. And that is going to happen maybe in 3 years or 5 years time. And I'm very sure the government has done everything enough, like interest subsidy, everything government has done. What 2 steps which probably if I can request them to do is, they have been given MEIS, that they're stopped all of a sudden, and people who have booked MEIS as a part of their receivables are forced to write it down because they are not going to get it now. If they can do anything about that, that will be very, very great help to the current exporters from India. And other schemes that they are coming, they are announcing, which is what I call it, couple of schemes which Prerna ji said that in space of MEIS, if they are announced well in time with a lot of clarity, because export orders are booked from 6 months to 1 year or 2 years, long-term contracts are also there. So people will be able to understand where they stand as compared to the government schemes. Arun bhai, that's what I want to say on this topic.
No, thank you, Mr. Sapakar. I do agree with you, and thanks for your perspective, because I think we should be, and there's no doubt about that, the support provided by the government was immense. In fact, we talked about, and we were much ahead of the time, and that's basically Ms. Joshi was talking about, short-term pain, the long-term gains, and that was exactly things happened. I think we were ahead of the time in terms of the lockdown announcement, but at the same time, there's more than 12% of the GDP was basically 9.7% rather, in fact, put into the system as a part of fiscal deficit. That was a great understanding, great support.
Can I suggest one thing which I probably have, like Prerna ji said about FTA. We as an industry believe that FTA has never worked in favor of India so far. So FTA is a very tight rope walk. And if they are not constructed well, as she has said, it will not work in favor of the Indian industries. So far, it has not worked. So I think the government is not signing new free trade agreement that's good for India, as it may go against Atmanirbhar Bharat also. So we have to be very, very cautious when we negotiate new FTA. That is what my request to her.
Sure, sure. I think, yeah, I mean, Government of India is cognizant on that. I think she will certainly do that one. So I think I'm also cognizant of the timing, and so in that there are a couple of questions coming from audience. So I have two questions, basically the last two final closing comment, and one is to Ms. Joshi. That you talked about technology in that. I think one successful scheme we have seen, and talk about the technology and skill upgradation, is that technology upgradation fund scheme played a good role in the Indian textile industry and made Indian textile a force, which is basically great to see that one. How can the government replicate this strategy across all sectors and enable Indian exporters to manufacture more globally competitive products?
So I would begin by referring to our union budget, which was placed by Honorable Finance Minister very recently in Parliament, wherein innovation and research and development, they were announced as one of the pillars of our economy, of our budget proposal, in fact. So there is, and in fact, our Honorable Finance Minister also set aside a corpus of rupees 50,000 crores for the National Research Foundation, for a period of 5 years. So such kind of things which the government is undertaking in the space of research, this is going to strengthen the research ecosystem in the country. In this regard, I would like to point out that the gross domestic expenditure on research and development in India is mainly driven by the government, with a share of 56% in total R&D. So in this regard, it is very important for the corporate sector to come forward and to take a lead to make India take its place as a technology and the global innovation leader. Why this is important. So again, another important thing which the union budget had mentioned was about the minimum government and the maximum governance. So the role of the government is to provide an enabling ecosystem and a world-class infrastructure where the industry can thrive and it can work upon. And one of the very recent examples which we just talked about also was the PLI schemes, wherein government is incentivizing the sales, and it is simultaneously. And how will the manufacturer achieve that incremental sales? Where will that come from? It will come from efficiency, and that efficiency will come through investing in technology, through investing in core competencies. So it is time for the corporate sector to come forward and to take a lead, to allow India to take its place in the global space as a innovation and the technology leader.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Joshi, for that. And then with that, I will basically ask one final question, because there are a couple of questions coming from the audience. Final question to Mr. Srivastava. Basically, just to conclude, sir, and that is two things happened in recent years. One, of course, the pandemic, no doubt about that, and the impact of pandemic had changed many codes and expected to change. And what we're talking about, the next normal or new normal. And there was another ongoing things, what you call the trade war between US and China. In that context, I was part of some of research project and some of the initiatives with some of the nodal body of the government, is how to attract most of the global manufacturing company to set a plant in India. Geographically, we are well placed. I mean, we have east and we have a west. Both sides can be supplied. We have a low cost labor, good technology, and in fact, Ms. Joshi talks about the governance piece. So things are moving favorable to India, in fact, or Indian community. What role can Indian export fraternity play?
Products I mentioned here. So the products which are important for the global value chains, where we have less share compared to our global trade share, these products are already covered in the PLI scheme. It's very intelligent work. So I sincerely hope that in next few years' time, as the production and exports of these products grow, our figures for participation in the GVCs will automatically improve. I have no doubts about this. But so one aspect is PLI scheme, that is the production part. Second aspect is logistics part, which is very important for the GVCs. For participation in GVCs, countries like South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, even China, they all have refurbished their port and custom systems. Quick entry and exit at the port and custom system is the first condition for participation. If we delay any shipment for whatever reason, then the future shipments in other countries will be delayed and entire chain will be derailed. So while PLI scheme is there, we should also provide, we are taking a lot of steps to minimize logistics cost. So I think these two, the initiatives in these two will take us in good state in the next few years. We can see the results. But I want to add here that with an example, let's focus on iPhone. It sells at about $700 in USA. It's exported from China to USA. Critical parts are made in Japan, Korea, and China does the final assembly. How much China gets? $12. It adds battery, does the final assembly. And the US customer pays $700. So China gets $12 out of $700, less than 2%. And it gets a big trade deficit and all the fights with the US for this $12 to this. So I say, let's not focus on superficial manufacturing. Let's focus on the deeper parts of the GVCs. So what are the deeper parts? So manufacturing, of course, in the deeper part is fine. But for GVC, there's a concept of smile curve. So it covers the pre-production, production, and post-production activities. So pre-production, what are the activities? We say you R&D for a product, making a prototype and design of the product. These are pre-production. So Apple keeps all the money in these steps. Then post-production is there after the production. Is distribution of a product, marketing, sales, after-sales service, there also. So smile curve is inverted U curve, elongated U curve, wherein poor countries, they are at the end, they do the low value-added manufacturing only. So we say we have to focus on high value-added manufacturing through the PLI scheme, and our corporates, Indian firms, or whosoever is participating, outside firms, they should also try to get some piece of the pre-production and post-production part of the smile curve. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Srivastav. That's well said, and thanks for your insight and perspective. I do understand. And as I said, that was the final question, and there's a couple of questions coming from the audience, and I do have basically a couple of minutes to ask those questions, so at least an audience get some better perspective. And this is clear. I mean, it's all to any panelist. Name is not mentioned in that. It's related to basically foreign trade policy. No doubt it's troubling time for exporters, and the current foreign policy is extended till March 2021. Government of India is framing new policy. Basically, the exporters are what they can expect from this policy, and what are the concerns Government of India has spotted that will be addressed in this foreign policy. I mean, anyone want to take up that question? So, Madam, you want to take that question, or Srivastav sir?
Okay, let me try. So, exports basically, once you have good products, then the task of the foreign trade policy is to minimize the cost disability and remove all the roadblocks. So we are doing that for years, and as soon as we recognize the issues, they are being handled. Like Prerna mentioned about inverted duty structure. If you notice, almost every year in the budget announcements, whatever comes to notice, government removes those sticky points. So it's a vast consultative exercise for trade policy. We talk to almost all the organizations, trade bodies, chambers, associations. It's a long consultation. We compile everything meticulously and try to look into everything, giving due weightage, and then the decisions are taken. But as I say, for promoting foreign trade, basic is products. We have to invest in products. Right now, this year, the PLI scheme is taking the cake for that. And the rest of the job is to address the cost disability through some schemes like ROTEP, or earlier the task which MEIS was doing. That's all I have to say at this moment. Thank you.
No, thank you for taking up this call. And in fact, I'm cognizant of the time. I think we have overshot by a few minutes. And with that, basically, I will conclude and I will close today's panel discussion. And thank you everyone for being part of such a wonderful panel. And that was great and good, insightful conversation we had. And we do believe that India is now recovering faster than earlier expected. There's a lot of learning we had during COVID-19, and we know that 2021 and 2022, and in fact beyond, is going to be a new normal. And we have seen one of the great support from the government that during the pandemic time, in fact, they went beyond. We never imagined what could be the extent of COVID-19 impact will be. But I think government, in fact, support and intervention at regular interval ensured that the impact was as low as possible through the policy, qualitative as well as quantitative, by putting some money in the, directly in the hands of the people. So, and many more expected going forward. Sorry.
Yeah. In fact, in this regard, I would just like to mention one very important thing which I forgot to mention. I think our Prime Minister, when he is hailing the wealth creators in the Parliament itself and acknowledging their role which is played by them in nation building, this in itself is a very, very positive signal which shows that at the highest level of policy making, the ecosystem is being enabled for the private sector to take its role and to take its rightful place in the economy.
No, you're rightly. You're right. That's what basically is happening, and that's so great, and it's been basically recognized globally, and that's a great initiatives. Now that's basically one done story. The second, how things looking like, there are many elements taken by the government and the exporter community, and then whole stakeholder who basically part of the ecosystem. There are many things talking about the production, creating the competitive, providing the fund, and ensuring their good marketplace in terms of the external market we have. I think with that, I will close and say thanks to everyone for such a wonderful interaction.
There are two eminent personalities of the government here. I would like to make last request to them. Very shortly, in very short time, India will be net exporter rather than importer. And then we will run into current container shortage. If government of India does not plan manufacturing containers soon, because any plant will take at least 18 months to crystallize, then we may have a container shortage, and then the outward freight from India will make the Indian products very, very uncompetitive. Yes, sir, Ajay Bhai. Ajay Bhai has to say something.
This has been noticed at the highest level, and plans, you will hear something very soon on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for that, and we got wonderful idea and we got execution as well. So thank you all of you for such an insightful conversation. And with that, I will close. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Arunji.
Thank you.
It indeed was an insightful discussion. I'm sure our audiences had some key takeaways from this session. Our sincere thanks to the panel for providing such amazing insights on today's theme. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the close of Dun & Bradstreet's Business Across Borders 2021. Once again, I thank our co-partners, Ion Exchange India Limited and Wilhelm Textiles India Private Limited, and all our publication partners for their invaluable support to this initiative. While even though this session is coming to an end, we've just begun to think about the innumerable opportunities that lie ahead for India and Indian exporters. Before we conclude for today, we had a few announcements to make for you. Please remember to visit our partner and product stalls in the lobby area before you leave. These stalls house very interesting information and content regarding our partners, products, and services. Also, your feedback is highly valued. Therefore, we request you to please share your feedback with us by clicking on the feedback icon on the sliding menu bar. Also, do share your opinions on social media handles with the hashtags DNBBAB and hashtag GrowWithDNB. Lastly, we also have a briefcase feature in the menu bar where you can preview and download company, product, and services information about Dun & Bradstreet. Well, thank you for joining us today. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye.